Twilight lingered over the Sea of Galilee as gentle waves caught the fading sunlight. Fishermen were tying their nets along the shore, preparing to rest after the day's labor, while families gathered in small towns nearby to break bread. Word had spread through these villages about a teacher. Some called him a wandering rabbi. Others whispered he might be a prophet who was traveling through Galilee. Rumors abounded of healings, of gentle words spoken to outcasts, and of a kindness rarely seen in men of authority. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. If you want to feel the love of Jesus Christ in your heart, write amen in the comments and subscribe. Children ran ahead along the dusty paths, hoping to catch a glimpse of this teacher. Merchants closed their stalls early, their curiosity piqued by the buzz of excitement. Men and women from all walks of life, devout Jews, Roman soldiers stationed in the area, and the occasional foreign traveler, followed a winding road up a gently sloping hillside. At its crest, the land offered a view of the shimmering waters below. This was where Jesus was said to be heading. By the time the evening shadows lengthened, a sizable crowd had assembled on the grassy slope. In the midst of this gathering, Jesus and a small band of close followers, disciples who had left their fishing boats, tax-collecting booths, and other livelihoods, walked. The disciples were ordinary folk, yet each seemed marked by the calm assurance of the teacher they followed. Simon Peter, a fisherman with calloused hands and a fervent heart, helped to guide people closer, ensuring that the elderly and the ill could be near enough to hear every word. James and John, known for their spirited personalities, arranged seating on the gently sloping ground so that families could settle in comfortably. Matthew, once a tax collector, marveled at how so many diverse groups, both devout Jews and curious Gentiles, were drawn to this singular voice. An older man, leaning heavily on a wooden staff, looked at Jesus with hopeful eyes. He had traveled many miles from a village near the Decapolis because he had heard that Jesus taught about God's closeness to the brokenhearted. A group of women carrying clay jars paused to listen, drawn by the hush that overtook the crowd as Jesus took his place upon a suitable ledge. Even before he spoke, there was a reverent silence. The hush was like the calm before the first light of dawn. Jesus gazed upon them all, rich and poor, young and old, healthy and frail. His expression carried both a divine authority and a deep compassion, as though he understood not only their outward struggles, but also the quiet longings in their hearts. He opened his mouth to teach, and his voice resonated in a gentle, clear tone that carried across the hillside. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These words, later known as the Beatitudes, settled like dew upon the hearts of those gathered. Mothers cradling their children found new hope, sensing that the teacher spoke of a God who was near, not distant or aloof. A man who had once been scorned for a skin disease felt the sting of tears as Jesus spoke of blessing for those who mourn and those who are poor in spirit. Merchants who had made their fortunes by sometimes unethical means stood in thought, wondering about the nature of real righteousness and the calling to be merciful. Jesus paused, allowing the truth to sink in. Then he continued, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." Some in the crowd exchanged glances, pondering what it meant to be salt and light. An older rabbi, wearing the traditional fringes of a faithful Jew, stroked his beard as he contemplated these words. They seemed to suggest that every person's life, especially those who chose to follow the teacher, would serve as a preserving and guiding influence in a sometimes harsh world. Jesus' gaze swept across the crowd once more, as though inviting each listener, regardless of background, to embrace a new perspective on how to live. He went on to address the sacred law of Moses. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." A murmur stirred. The scribes and Pharisees were considered experts in the law, revered by many for their devotion. To have a righteousness surpass theirs seemed an impossible task. Yet Jesus spoke with an authority that transcended even the greatest teachers known to Israel. The crowd leaned forward, eager to understand how he would clarify this higher righteousness. He provided a series of contrasts, each beginning with, "You have heard that it was said," followed by, "But I say to you." With each statement, he peeled back layers of religious custom and tradition, revealing the heart of divine intent. "You have heard it said to those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift." A fisherman in the crowd lowered his gaze. He had quarreled fiercely with another merchant over fishing territories. The teacher's words about anger and reconciliation suddenly felt very personal, less about lofty religious ideals and more about how to live in genuine harmony. "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery in his heart." A group of men whispered among themselves, their eyes reflecting both conviction and wonder. Jesus was not merely prohibiting outward sins, but pointing to the inward motivations, thoughts, desires, and intentions of the heart. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery." A solemn hush fell. Many in that culture considered divorce a matter of simple legal documentation, often leaving wives in desperate situations. But here, Jesus seemed to defend the sanctity of marriage with unwavering seriousness, highlighting the dignity and security of spouses. Again, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not swear falsely.' But I say to you, do not swear at all. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no." The older rabbi nodded with respect, recognizing Jesus was teaching about integrity of speech, truthfulness and simplicity rather than convoluted religious vows. You have heard it said, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Eyes widened at this. The idea of turning the other cheek was radical. Whispers moved through the crowd, some in awe of the teacher's gentleness, others baffled by such an apparent rejection of retaliation. You have heard it said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. On a nearby rock, a Roman soldier, responsible for enforcing the empire's laws, stood listening. His expression was conflicted, for he recognized that many in the crowd viewed him as an enemy. Yet here was a Jewish teacher urging them to love, even those they feared or resented. This radical love sounded unlike anything the soldier had heard before. And yet, there was a ring of truth and an unexpected grace in those words that tugged at his heart. Jesus paused again, letting the teachings linger in the atmosphere. The crowd looked at one another, their reactions ranging from stunned silence to quiet tears. Many realized they had come to the hillside anticipating rules or regulations, like those they'd heard their entire lives. Instead, they were encountering something deeper, a new way of being, a transformation of the heart. As dusk settled fully over the Sea of Galilee, Jesus offered a gentle smile to the gathering. Torches were lit here and there to guide those who might travel home in the dark, but few wished to leave. Children huddled close to their mothers, enthralled by the teacher's voice. Farmers, with the dust of the fields still clinging to their robes, found themselves unexpectedly reflecting on what it meant to truly live with compassion. The day had passed swiftly, and though the night air grew cool, no one desired to depart. Jesus looked upon them with empathy, perceiving both their physical weariness and their spiritual hunger. He motioned to his disciples to prepare for a moment of rest before continuing. That evening, small fires dotted the hillside, illuminating faces that had been marked by hope, uncertainty, and awe. Some shared modest portions of bread and dried fish with strangers, an outpouring of goodwill prompted by the teacher's words. Whispers of conversation floated through the air. Could this man be more than a prophet? He speaks with authority, as though the law was his to reveal. I feel as if my heart is ablaze with a holy fire I can't explain. Meanwhile, Jesus slipped away briefly to a quiet place. There, beneath the star-laden sky, he prayed. In that intimate space with the Father, he prepared to unveil even more about the kingdom of heaven and the nature of a life wholly surrendered to God. Thus ended the first day on the Mount. Hearts had been stirred, but the fullness of his message was not yet complete. Night embraced the hillside, lulling most into a peaceful sleep as they anticipated the dawn of a new day and the unfolding of further revelations from this teacher who spoke with a divine yet profoundly humane voice. Chapter 2, Revelations at Dawn. Morning broke upon the Galilean hills with the gentle warmth of the rising sun. A crisp breeze moved through the olive groves, carrying with it the aroma of fresh dew on wild grass. One by one, the people stirred from their makeshift resting spots. They awoke with a quiet expectation, the memory of Jesus' words echoing in their minds. The crowd had grown overnight as news spread that the teacher would continue sharing his message at daybreak. Jesus emerged from a secluded spot where he had spent time in prayer. The disciples gathered around him, their own hearts brimming with questions. Peter, his rugged face still marked by the honesty of a fisherman's life, looked upon Jesus with admiration. Even with all they had witnessed, The miracles, the calling of each disciple, and now these profound teachings, their awe remained fresh. As the assembly finished their morning meals, perhaps a bit of dried fish or leftover bread, Jesus once again found a small clearing on the hillside, set slightly above the crowd so that his voice could carry. His posture was poised, and his gaze held both humility and authority. He began by speaking about acts of devotion, such as giving to the needy, prayer, and fasting, practices deeply woven into Jewish life. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. A man who prided himself on making grand gestures of giving felt a pang of conviction. He had often announced his charitable acts publicly, longing for the praise of friends. Now he realized that the teacher's instruction pointed to a deeper, more authentic faith, one that sought God's approval above human applause. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in synagogues, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. A hush spread as Jesus continued, teaching them a prayer of profound simplicity and depth, a prayer that would be known throughout the ages as the Lord's Prayer. Pray then in this way: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. Men and women alike closed their eyes as these words wrapped them in comfort and hope. There was a warm assurance in addressing God so intimately as Father, acknowledging His holiness and asking for daily provision and forgiveness. Some who were burdened with guilt or shame felt tears gathering at the corner of their eyes, stirred by the possibility of genuine absolution. Jesus continued, "And whenever you fast, do not look dismal, like the hypocrites. They disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others but by your Father who is in secret." Several devout men nodded thoughtfully. Fasting had long been a practice in Israel, but they realized how easily one could turn it into a badge of honor instead of a humble devotion. Jesus spoke with such authority on these matters, not as an outsider criticizing tradition, but as someone revealing the heart behind it all. He then shifted to a theme that resonated with both rich and poor: treasures and worries. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. A wealthy merchant in fine robes fingered the gold trim on his garment, reflecting on the teacher's words. He had accumulated many possessions, but as Jesus spoke, he wondered about the deeper significance of wealth and whether his abundance truly satisfied his heart. Meanwhile, a widow who possessed only the clothes on her back felt oddly reassured. This teacher promised a treasure more secure than any amount of coin, a treasure of the soul. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap. yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? In this moment, a tiny sparrow hopped on the grass near a child's feet, as if providing a living example of the words spoken. The child laughed with delight, while the crowd marveled at Jesus' gentle wisdom. He illuminated that their heavenly Father was both creator and provider, caring for every need with intimate detail. Even the stern-faced Roman soldier from the previous evening found himself strangely soothed by the notion of a divine Father concerned with daily necessities. Jesus paused, then looked upon the gathering with an intensity born of compassion. He spoke of judgment next, cautioning them about hypocrisy. Do not judge so that you may not be judged, for with the judgment you make, you will be judged. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's. Laughter broke out softly among a few, as the teacher's example was humorous yet piercing. One man who often criticized his neighbors under the guise of righteousness felt a flush of shame rise in his cheeks. The message was clear. They were called to be merciful, recognizing their own shortcomings before correcting others. With that admonition, Jesus transitioned into an invitation, urging them to trust in prayer. Ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give a stone? If you then, who are imperfect, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Parents in the crowd smiled at the thought. They recalled how they had provided food or comfort to their children with loving hearts. If they, flawed as they were, could extend kindness, how much more would the Creator himself respond to his children's pleas? He offered a summary of the ethics he was unveiling. In everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Those near the front whispered among themselves, the golden rule. Simple words, yet they encapsulated a grand vision of mutual love, justice, and mercy. The crowd sensed a shift in their understanding of what God required. Not an endless stream of sacrifices or hollow public religiosity, but a genuine inward transformation that blossomed into kindness. A seriousness then fell over Jesus' tone. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. A young man, bright with youthful idealism, frowned slightly, wrestling with the notion that the way of true life might be challenging. Yet the teacher's presence radiated a gentle encouragement. Hard though it might be, it was not impossible. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. Some in the gathering recalled teachers they had followed in the past, charismatic figures who had led them astray. Jesus was cautioning them to discern carefully. Authentic teaching would yield good fruit, compassion, truth, mercy, and love. Finally, he delivered a sobering insight into the nature of genuine discipleship. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, do many deeds of power in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you evildoers. A collective gasp arose. Was he implying that mere outward acts, even miraculous ones, could be hollow if the heart was not aligned with God's will? The gravity of his words made many tremble, yet in his eyes they still saw compassion. The challenge was real, but so was the invitation to truly know him and walk in obedience. He concluded with a parable about a wise builder and a foolish one. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Silence enveloped the hillside. In the distance, a fisherman's boat could be seen bobbing on the Sea of Galilee, a reminder of the realities of storms that could arise with little warning. The teacher's parable painted a vivid picture. To heed his words was to anchor one's life on an unshakable foundation. To ignore them was to invite disaster. A gentle wind swept across the grasses, and the crowd felt that something profound, truly holy, had occurred. In that moment, it was clear that these words would not remain on a mountaintop. They would echo through generations, spanning continents and centuries. The people looked at Jesus, astonished by the authority with which he spoke. He had taught them as one who held the keys to the law's deepest meaning, not as the scribes or Pharisees who merely repeated what had been handed down. Men and women began to rise, some to approach the teacher with questions, others to depart toward distant towns, carrying with them a fresh vision of life. Word of the Sermon on the Mount, as it would later be known, spread like seed on fertile soil. Seeds of mercy, humility, devotion, and love sank into hearts once burdened by legalism or hopelessness. A Pharisee, who had come to scrutinize Jesus, quietly slipped away. He was unsettled, but not unaffected. Meanwhile, a woman who had been weighed down by guilt approached the disciples, seeking to learn more about the teacher who dared to speak about God like a loving father. The Roman soldier, no longer clad in full regalia, lingered at the edges of the crowd, as if torn between duty and the stirring in his soul. Jesus' disciples gathered around him once more. Simon Peter marveled out loud, "Master, the people are astonished. Your words have awakened something in them I've never seen before." Jesus smiled, placing a hand on Peter's shoulder. His eyes shone with the compassion that had guided every teaching. "My friend," he said softly, "the kingdom of heaven is very near to them, even nearer than they realize." As midday approached, Jesus and his disciples descended the hillside, meeting those who needed healing, counsel, or a simple word of encouragement. Many from the crowd followed at a distance, reluctant to leave the presence of the one who had cast new light on ancient laws and shown them a path beyond empty ritual. Whispers spread in every direction of how he had taught not just new commands, but a new heart, a new love, and a new life. Thus concluded the Sermon on the Mount, but its impact had only begun. No longer was devotion simply about offerings at the temple or public displays of piety. It had become an inward journey of the heart, calling each person to trust fully in God and to love in a way that reflected divine compassion. This message would endure persecution, find expression in foreign lands, be woven into the hearts of saints and reformers, and shape the moral vision of countless souls. And for those who stood on that mountain, feeling the gentle sun upon their faces while the teacher spoke, the world had shifted beneath their feet. They had glimpsed the dawn of a new covenant, a new understanding of the God who dwelt among them, not merely enthroned in distant heaven, but walking the roads of Galilee, touching lepers, comforting the weary and calling each heart to something deeper. Indeed, they had witnessed the unveiling of a kingdom not marked by the might of armies or earthly splendor, but by an abiding, transformative love. At last the crowd thinned, returning to their homes and villages, carrying with them the seeds of those eternal words. Some would plant them faithfully, allowing them to take root and yield the fruit of mercy, forgiveness, and peace. Others might let the cares of the world choke them out. But the word had gone forth, never to return empty. In the days that followed, as travelers journeyed from Galilee toward Jerusalem or ventured across the Jordan, they recounted what they had heard. They spoke of Jesus of Nazareth, who taught as one with unearthly wisdom, one who seemed to stand in the line of Moses, yet surpass him in authority. They whispered of a love strong enough to pray for enemies and a righteousness that transcended mere rule-keeping. Something wondrous had happened on that hillside near the Sea of Galilee, and its resonance would be felt for all ages to come. And though this sermon would soon be tested by the trials of life, including opposition from powerful leaders and the heartbreak of betrayal, its essence would stand like a house built upon rock. For these were not the words of a mere man. They were the living declaration of God's own heart, spoken through the voice of the Son, both fully divine and disarmingly human, who called all who would hear to enter a kingdom built on grace and truth.